What happens when two powerhouse women clash over a decades-old wound that never healed? The music industry was left stunned when country legend Reba McEntire walked off Jennifer Hudson's daytime talk show in front of a live studio audience. The confrontation that unfolded was years in the making, and what started as a simple promotional interview quickly spiraled into television gold. Before we dive into exactly what went down, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment, letting me know which artist you think was in the right. Trust me, you're going to want to pick a side after hearing this story. It was supposed to be a routine appearance. Reba McEntire, the queen of country music herself, was scheduled to appear on the Jennifer Hudson show to discuss her upcoming tours and new album. The studio audience buzzed with excitement as Jennifer Hudson, radiant in a flowing emerald dress, walked onto the stage with her signature warm smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to the one and only Reba McEntire," Jennifer announced, her voice carrying that unmistakable powerhouse quality that made her a star. The audience erupted as Reba emerged from backstage. Her red hair perfectly styled, wearing a sharp black blazer and boots that clicked confidently against the polished floor. She waved to the crowd before settling into the plush interview chair across from Jennifer. "Reba, it's such an honor to have you here," Jennifer began, leaning forward with genuine enthusiasm. "You look absolutely stunning, and I have to say your energy is infectious." Reba smiled graciously, adjusting slightly in her chair. "Well, thank you, Jennifer. It's wonderful to be here. Your show has become such a staple, and I've been looking forward to this conversation. Now, before we talk about your incredible new project, I have to ask about something that's been on my mind," Jennifer said, her tone shifting slightly. "You know, we've both been in this industry for decades, and I've always admired how you've navigated the changes in music. But I'm curious about your thoughts on crossover artists, especially those of us who've moved between different genres." Reba's expression became more guarded, though she maintained her professional demeanor. "Well, I think talent is talent, Jennifer. Good music speaks for itself regardless of where it comes from." "That's interesting," Jennifer replied, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "Because I remember a time, maybe 15 years ago, when you had some pretty strong opinions about certain artists crossing over into country music. Specifically, you mentioned in several interviews that some people were just trying to ride the wave without understanding the heart of country music." The studio audience sensed the shift in energy, the casual chatter dying down as tension filled the air. Reba's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Jennifer, I think there might be some misunderstanding about what I said back then," Reba responded carefully. "I've always supported artists who bring authenticity to whatever genre they choose to explore." "Authenticity," Jennifer repeated, her eyebrows raising slightly. "That's an interesting word choice because when I was exploring country music early in my career, working with some of Nashville's top producers and songwriters, I remember reading quotes from you that seemed to question whether artists like me belonged in that space." The audience was now completely silent, hanging on every word. Reba shifted in her seat, her professional composure starting to show cracks. "Now hold on just a minute," Reba said, her Oklahoma accent becoming more pronounced as her voice took on a defensive tone. "I think you're taking some old comments out of context. I've never singled out any individual artist." "Maybe not by name," Jennifer shot back, her own voice rising slightly. "But the timing was pretty convenient. Right when I was getting serious radio play with my country tracks. Suddenly there were all these interviews where you're talking about protecting the integrity of country music from people who were just genre hopping for commercial success." Reba's face flushed red, matching her hair. "Jennifer, I think you're reading way too much into some offhand comments I made years ago. This isn't what I came here to discuss." "Oh, but I think it is exactly what we need to discuss," Jennifer countered, leaning back in her chair with her arms crossed. "Because your offhand comments had real consequences. Do you know how it felt to have someone I looked up to, someone whose career I'd studied and admired, essentially dismiss my efforts as inauthentic?" "I never said you were inauthentic," Reba protested. But her voice lacked conviction. "You didn't have to say my name for everyone to know exactly who you were talking about," Jennifer replied coldly. "The country music community is smaller than people think, Reba. Word travels fast, and your opinion carries weight. When you questioned whether certain artists understood the heart of country music, people listened." Reba stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm not going to sit here and be accused of sabotaging your career, Jennifer. That's completely unfair. Sit back down, Reba," Jennifer said firmly, not moving from her own chair. We're not done talking about this. Actually, we are, Reba replied, her voice icy. I came here as a professional courtesy to promote my work and have a pleasant conversation. I didn't come here to be ambushed with decade-old grievances that you've apparently been holding on to. The studio audience watched in stunned silence as the two women faced off. The carefully orchestrated pleasantries of daytime television completely abandoned. Ambushed. Jennifer laughed bitterly. Reba, this isn't an ambush. This is accountability. Do you have any idea what it's like to pour your heart into music? To work with the best writers and musicians Nashville has to offer, only to have someone like you question whether you belong there. Someone like me? Reba's voice rose dangerously. What exactly is that supposed to mean? Someone who's been handed the keys to the kingdom, Jennifer shot back. Someone who's never had to prove that she belongs in country music because she was born into it. You've never had to fight for legitimacy the way some of us have. The tension in the studio was palpable now, with cameras capturing every moment of the escalating confrontation. Production assistants stood frozen at the edges of the set, unsure whether to intervene. I have worked my entire life for everything I've achieved, Reba said through gritted teeth. And I won't stand here and let you diminish that because you're upset about some perceived slight from 15 years ago. Received slight. Jennifer's voice cracked with emotion. Reba, your comments helped create an environment where I felt like I had to choose between staying in my lane or risking being labeled as opportunistic. That's not perception, that's reality. Reba looked around the studio, taking in the stunned faces of the audience and crew before fixing Jennifer with a steely glare. You know what, Jennifer? Maybe the problem wasn't what I said. Maybe the problem was that deep down you knew I was right. The words hung in the air like a slap, her expression shifting from anger to something much more dangerous. A cold fury that made everyone in the studio hold their breath. Excuse me. Jennifer's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more menace than any shout. Did you just say I knew you were right? Reba realized she'd crossed a line, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. I'm saying maybe instead of blaming me for your struggles in country music, you should ask yourself why those struggles existed in the first place. Oh, I know exactly why they existed, Jennifer replied, rising slowly from her chair. Her elegant dress seemed to transform her into something formidable, a queen preparing for battle. They existed because people like you gatekeep genres like they own them. They existed because talent apparently isn't enough if you don't fit a certain mold. That's not what I meant, and you know it, Reba shot back, but her voice wavered slightly. No, I think that's exactly what you meant, Jennifer continued, her voice gaining strength. You want to talk about authenticity? Let's talk about authenticity. I grew up listening to Patti Cline, Loretta Lynn, and yes, Reba McEntire. I learned to sing by studying your vocal runs, your storytelling, your emotional delivery. When I decided to explore country music, it wasn't some calculated career move. It was me coming home to the music that raised me. The audience was completely captivated now, watching what felt like a masterclass in confrontation unfold before their eyes. I spent months in Nashville, Jennifer continued, her voice growing more passionate with each word. I worked with writers who'd penned #1 hits. I recorded with musicians who'd played on classic albums. I put everything I had into those songs, and they were good, Reba. You know they were good. I never said they weren't, Reba mumbled. But her earlier confidence was crumbling. You didn't have to, Jennifer fired back. Your comments did the talking for you. When the queen of country music questions whether crossover artists understand the heart of the music, Rio programmers listen. Venue bookers listen, fans listen, and suddenly doors that were opening started slamming shut. Reba's face was now pale beneath her makeup. Jennifer, I had no idea that my comments had that kind of impact on your career. That was never my intention. Your intention doesn't matter, Jennifer replied sharply. Impact matters. Results matter. And the result was that a promising country music career got strangled in its cradle because someone decided I wasn't country enough. The studio felt electric with tension. Several audience members were leaning forward in their seats, completely absorbed in the drama unfolding before them. But you know what the real tragedy is? Jennifer continued, her voice taking on a different quality now, tinged with sadness. I believed you. I internalized what you said, and I started questioning myself. I started wondering if maybe I didn't belong in that world after all. Do you know how damaging that is to an artist? Reba's composure finally cracked completely. I'm sorry, Jennifer. I'm truly sorry. I never meant for my words to hurt you that way. Sorry doesn't give me back those years, Jennifer replied, her voice cold again. Sorry doesn't undo the damage to my confidence, or the opportunities that dried up, or the nights I spent wondering if I was fooling myself about my own talent. What do you want from me? Reba asked, her voice small and defeated. I want you to own it, Jennifer said firmly. I want you to stop hiding behind phrases like perceived slights and misunderstandings. I want you to acknowledge that your words have power and that you use that power irresponsibly. Reba looked around the studio again, seeming to remember for the first time that they were on live television, that cameras were rolling, that this conversation was being broadcast to millions of people. I can't do this, she said suddenly, shaking her head. I can't have this conversation on national television. This isn't fair. Fair? Jennifer's voice rose incredulously. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you torpedoed my country music aspirations in interview after interview? Was it fair when you questioned my authenticity without ever bothering to listen to my music or understand my story? That's not what happened, Reba protested weakly. That's rich, Reba. That's really rich. The tension between them was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Production crew members stood frozen, unsure whether they should cut to commercial or let this historic confrontation play out. I'm not running away, Reba said. But her actions contradicted her words as she took several steps toward the edge of the stage. I just think this conversation has gotten out of hand. This isn't what I agreed to when I came on your show. Life doesn't always give us what we agree to, Jennifer replied. Sometimes we have to face uncomfortable truths. Sometimes we have to be held accountable for our actions, even years later. Accountable? Reba's voice flared with renewed anger. I've been in this industry for over 40 years, Jennifer. I've paved the way for countless artists, including you. I've broken barriers and fought battles that made it easier for women in country music. And you want to tear me down over some old comments. I don't want to tear you down, Jennifer said, her voice softening slightly but remaining firm. I want you to grow up and take responsibility. I want you to acknowledge that your comments hurt me and probably hurt other artists, too. I want you to use your platform more thoughtfully going forward. Reba stood at the edge of the stage now, visibly struggling with the decision of whether to stay or go. The audience watched in complete silence, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. You know what, Jennifer? Maybe you're right about one thing. Maybe I don't belong here after all. And with that, she turned and walked toward the exit, leaving Jennifer standing alone on the stage, the studio audience in shocked silence, and the entire daytime television world reeling from what they had just witnessed. But Jennifer Hudson wasn't about to let Reba McEntire have the last word. Not after years of carrying this wound. Not after finally finding the courage to address it publicly. And certainly not after Reba had just tried to turn herself into the victim. Oh no, you don't get to do that, Jennifer called out, her voice carrying across the entire studio with the same power that had made her a star. You don't get to make this about you being the wounded party. Turn around, Reba. Reba froze at the edge of the stage, her hand already reaching for the curtain that would take her backstage and away from this confrontation. The entire studio held its breath. Turn around and face me, Jennifer repeated, her voice commanding, but not shouting. If you're going to walk out, at least have the courage to look me in the eye when you do it. Slowly, reluctantly, Reba turned back to face the stage. Her face was flushed, her carefully styled hair slightly disheveled from running her hands through it. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of the conversation. You want to paint yourself as the victim here, Jennifer continued, taking a step closer to where Reba stood. You want to act like I'm being unfair by calling you out on something you actually did. Then let's talk about fairness, Reba. Let's really talk about it. I've already apologized, Reba said, her voice barely audible over the studio sound system. What more do you want? I want honesty, Jennifer replied sharply. Real honesty, not some half-hearted apology that you're only giving because you got caught. Do you even remember the specific things you said about crossover artists, Reba? Silence spoke volumes. I do, Jennifer continued. I remember every word. You said that some artists were treating country music like a costume they could put on and take off. You said that true country music came from lived experience, not from calculated career moves. You said that the genre needed to be protected from people who saw it as just another way to sell records. The audience was transfixed, watching this masterclass in confrontation unfold. Several people were recording on their phones, knowing they were witnessing television history. And when journalists asked you to clarify who you were talking about, Jennifer pressed on. You smiled that knowing smile and said that real country fans would know authenticity when they heard it. Everyone knew you were talking about me, Reba. Everyone. I was trying to protect something I love, Reba said weakly, finally finding her voice again. No, Jennifer shot back immediately. You were trying to protect your position. There's a difference. You saw younger artists, diverse artists, talented artists moving into your space, and instead of welcoming us or mentoring us, you tried to build walls to keep us out. Reba took a step back onto the stage, drawn back into the confrontation despite herself. That's not fair, Jennifer. I've supported plenty of young artists over the years. Young artists who looked like you, Jennifer replied without missing a beat. Young artists who fit the traditional country music mold. But when someone like me, someone who brought different influences and a different perspective, tried to contribute to the genre, you questioned whether we belonged there at all. I questioned whether you understood what country music was really about, Reba said, her defensive anger returning. And there it is, Jennifer said, pointing at Reba with something approaching triumph. There's the real truth. You didn't question my talent. You didn't question my work ethic or my dedication. You questioned whether I understood what country music was about, as if understanding music is determined by where you grew up or what you look like. The studio was electric with tension. Production crew members were frantically signaling to each other, torn between their responsibility to manage the show and their recognition that they were capturing something extraordinary. I grew up in Chicago, but I grew up on country music, Jennifer continued, her voice rising with passion. I learned about heartbreak from Tammy Wynette. I learned about strength from Dolly Parton. I learned about storytelling from you, Reba. The music raised me just like it raised you. The only difference was geography. It's not just about geography, Reba protested. But her argument was losing steam. Then what is it about? Jennifer demanded. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like it was about keeping the club exclusive. It looks like it was about making sure that certain people knew they weren't really welcome, no matter how much they loved the music or how hard they worked. Reba stood there for a long moment, looking around the studio at the sea of faces, all focused on her, waiting for her response. The weight of the moment seemed to settle on her shoulders. Maybe you're right, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. What? Jennifer asked, clearly not expecting this response. Maybe you're right, Reba repeated louder this time. Maybe I was trying to protect my position. Maybe I was scared of change, scared of what the genre might become if it started expanding beyond its traditional boundaries. The admission hung in the air like a confession in church. The audience seemed to lean forward collectively, sensing that something significant was happening. But here's what I need you to understand, Jennifer, Reba continued, her voice growing stronger. I wasn't trying to hurt you personally. I was trying to preserve something that I thought might get lost. I was wrong about the methods, and I was probably wrong about the threat, but the intention wasn't malicious. Intention doesn't excuse impact, Jennifer replied. But her voice had lost some of its edge. No, it doesn't, Reba agreed. And I'm sorry for the impact my words had on your career and your confidence. I'm sorry that I made you question yourself when you were trying to create something beautiful. That was wrong of me, regardless of my intentions. The studio fell silent as both women stood looking at each other across the stage. The anger was still there, but something had shifted in the dynamic. I need you to understand something, too, Jennifer said after a long pause. This isn't just about me. This is about every artist who's been made to feel like they don't belong, like their perspective isn't valid, like their contribution to music isn't authentic enough. Your words had power, Reba. They still do. I know that now, Reba replied. I should have known it then. The conversation seemed to be winding down, the explosive energy of the confrontation giving way to something more reflective. But the damage had been done. The confrontation had been captured, broadcast live, and would undoubtedly become one of the most talked about moments in daytime television history. I think we've said everything that needs to be said, Reba said finally, looking directly at Jennifer. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday, but I understand if you can't. I'm working on it, Jennifer replied honestly. But forgiveness is a process, not a moment. Reba nodded, understanding the weight of that statement without another word. She turned and walked off the stage, this time for real. The curtains closed behind her, leaving Jennifer standing alone in front of a studio audience that didn't know whether to applaud or sit in stunned silence. Jennifer looked out at the crowd, then directly into the camera. "We'll be right back," she said simply as the show cut to commercial. What you just witnessed was one of the most raw, honest confrontations ever captured on daytime television. Two powerhouse women, each carrying years of hurt and misunderstanding, finally laying their cards on the table. Whether you think Jennifer was right to ambush Reba, or whether you believe Reba was unfairly attacked, one thing is certain. This conversation needed to happen. Make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one, and drop a comment below answering this question. Do you think Reba's apology was genuine, or was it just damage?